When you hear the name Jeffrey Epstein, you probably think of his horrific crimes, his private island, and that infamous list of powerful friends. But what if that's just scratching the surface? The source material we're looking at today suggests there's something much deeper going on here, a hidden architecture of power that made it all possible. So let's investigate the system that could create a man like Jeffrey Epstein. You know, the real mystery isn't just what he did, but how on earth did he get away with it for so long? How does a college dropout from Brooklyn end up with a network that includes presidents, princes, and even Nobel Prize winners? Our source material tries to answer that exact question, and it frames Epstein not as some kind of one-off monster, but as a specific type of operator working inside a much, much bigger game. And this quote right here, this really gets to the heart of it. The idea is that Epstein wasn't just a financier. No, he allegedly belonged to this small, very shadowy group of people who operate in the gray areas, between governments, spy agencies, and Wall Street. They're the ultimate go-betweens. Okay, so to really get our heads around the Epstein story, we first have to understand this role he supposedly played. Let's break down what our source is calling the professional fixer. Think of a fixer as, well, like a human bridge. They connect powerful people and institutions that can't officially be seen talking to each other. They're the ones who arrange the secret deals, move money around quietly, and they seem to operate with this incredible layer of protection, probably because they're just too useful to some very powerful people. And to really get this role, it helps to see that this isn't some new phenomenon. It's a pattern. This slide compares Epstein to another alleged fixer, a guy named Bruce Rappaport from back in the 1980s. The story goes that the CIA used Rappaport to secretly broker an oil deal between Iraq and Israel, two countries that were officially enemies. And when people started asking questions about him, the CIA supposedly buried its own dirty file on the guy to protect the mission. See the model here? A private, deniable asset used for sensitive state business and operating with a whole lot of protection, which is exactly what the source claims Epstein was doing. All right, so if people like Epstein and Rappaport are the cogs in the machine, what's the machine itself? Well, the source material describes it as this kind of self-sustaining black ops engine, and it's fueled by a very particular and very strange liar. Now, I know this sounds like it's straight out of a spy movie, but the argument here is that it's a cold, hard historical fact. Think about it. Intelligence agencies need ways to fund covert ops without anyone, especially Congress, knowing about it. And who are the experts in logistics, black markets, and moving cash off the books? Organized crime. It's a partnership of convenience, all built around the need for plausible deniability. And this quote from our source, man, it just cuts right to the heart of it. Why drugs? Because they're small, they're incredibly valuable, and they generate mountains of untraceable cash. That cash can then be washed clean and used to fund rebels, stage coups, or run any number of secret operations that taxpayer money could never, ever legally touch. And look, this isn't just some wild theory. The argument is that this is a playbook that's been used over and over again throughout modern history. So let's take a look at a few examples of this whole thing in action. You can see the pattern, right? It's consistent. It goes all the way back to World War II with the US allying with the Italian mafia to fight the fascists. Then in the 60s, using mob hitmen in plots against Castro. And of course, the infamous Iran-Contra scandal. A key piece of this puzzle was the BCCI Bank, which basically became the CIA's go-to spot for washing money to fund operations all over the world. So this all boils down to a pretty straightforward four-step model for funding covert stuff. Step 1, you get your hands on a high-value black market product. Step 2, you use criminal networks to move it around. Step 3, you wash the profits through a bank that's in on the game. And finally, Step 4, that clean cash is now untraceable fuel for secret operations, completely off the government's official books. And this is where Jeffrey Epstein pops right back into the story. According to the source, when he was at Bear Stearns in the late 70s and early 80s, the firm was a major clearinghouse for BCCI, the exact same bank at the heart of the CIA's secret funding for the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. So this puts Epstein right at the crossroads of Wall Street and secret spy games way back, decades before he became a household name. Okay, so with all that history in mind, let's bring it back to today and to the big questions that are probably still locked away in some classified government vault. Now, this next part is, honestly, it's pretty mind-blowing. Years before most of us had ever heard his name, way back in 1999, Jeffrey Epstein himself was asking the CIA what information they had on him. And then he did it again in 2011. Now think about that for a second. Why would a private financier be so concerned about what was in his own CIA file? And the CIA's response? Well, it's a classic non-answer answer. It's called a GLOMAR response. It's a very telling reply. It's a tool they use when just admitting that the files exist would, by itself, reveal classified information. The implication here is pretty heavy. Whatever Epstein was asking about touched on things the agency considers vital to national security. And you have to remember the timescale we're talking about here. 40 years. A potential 40-year career from the late 1970s all the way until his death. That's 4 decades of operating at the intersection of international finance, global politics, and, it would seem, the world of intelligence. 4 decades of collecting who knows what kind of secrets. And so, we're left with this massive, really unsettling question. The source argues that the full story here isn't just about one man's evil acts, but about a hidden system of influence and power. If those files were ever opened, they might not just tell us secrets about Epstein. They might reveal a whole hidden history of how power really works in the shadows. It makes you wonder, right? What do you think is hiding in those files?